So, Paddy, I managed yesterday to avoid asking you what your Spotify age was.
Oh, yes. Well, my real age is 59.
Yes, you're looking tremendous on it.
Thank you very much. And my Spotify age is 45, I think.
Oh,
Yeah.
what a groover.
I don't think it's deliberate. It's just that I'm not much of a Spotify user, so I've got a little stuff on there. So the algorithm's twisted.
What is it you've been listening to? All that Central C or Taylor Swift's been bringing the age down.
I went into a country vibe because I was working on Radio 2 and I had to research the current hits in that area, and I think that's what did it. But I'm not really a big Spotify person. In my house, I listen to on a different format.
BBC Sounds, of course, is the premium audio platform. But lots of people, newscasters, have been getting in touch to tell us, like, marvellous, lovely swats, that Newscast was at the top of your list for all the things that you've listened to. So thank you very much indeed for telling us that, including B. Williams, who wrote to say, Newscast got my top spot. Probably a little late, but thank you for accompanying me through my year. Well, thank you for being with us, B. Williams.
B, we give you an A, and we now get on with Sunday's newscast.
It's Laura in the studio.
It's Paddy in the studio.
And
it's also Joe Pike in the studio.
Hello, Joe Pike. How very nice to have you with us.
Lovely to be here.
So today, the main news, in a kind of strange weekend, because it's actually been not a super newsy weekend, and we're used to this sort of weekend. See, Paddy's shaking because you haven't got the normal, like, news, adrenaline, smack it into my veins. It's actually been quite a quiet news weekend. However, the big story from the government's point of view this weekend, which we spent most of our time on the telly box talking about this morning, was the dreadful situation that there are nearly 1 million people between the age of 16 and 24 who aren't in a job, they're not training, they haven't got an apprenticeship, they're not studying, and they are bunched together in the very ugly acronym of a NEET, not in education, employment or training, which I think should be retired as a term because it sounds so horrible. But, Joe, the government today is coming out with the beginnings of a plan of how to crack this problem, aren't they?
They are, Laura, and they're spending £800 million on it. There are sort of three parts to what Pat McFadden, the Welfare Secretary, was setting out today. The biggest group of people, about 900,000 of them or so, will get intensive advice. That's how he put it. Advice about getting back into work, following opportunities, maybe getting some sort of work experience or apprenticeship. There will be work experience or training for about a third of that number, so 300,000. And then 55,000 will get a subsidised job offer. So those subsidised job offers, minimum wage, 25 hours a week, will be for people who are most persistently unemployed, so people who have been out of work for 18 months. And it is an acknowledgement that whatever graph you look at, everything seems to be going up. This is unsustainable. We know the forecasts of the welfare bill going towards the end of the Parliament are what we're adding tens of billions of pounds of public spending. And this is Labour's attempt to try and sort that out.
So there's an economic pressure, but I got the sense also from Pat McFadden today that he's also trying to say, look, this is a moral pressure as well because of the kind of terrible wasted opportunity for people when they're starting out in the world as young adults. And it's so hard. And of all the evidence and research shows as well that the longer you're on any kind of benefit or the longer you're doing nothing, the harder it is then to do something. And there's particularly been a very, very steep increase in the number of young people who are on long-term sick, citing mental health as one of the problems. And there are all sorts of extraordinary figures out there. But one of the figures we put to Pat McFadden this morning was a 76% increase in the numbers of young people who are citing mental health as a reason for them being on the long-term sick since 2019.
We will get the employers to sign up to offer the training. There's no reason why they shouldn't, because it's backed by government money and government investment. And ultimately, on the subsidised job, the government will actually pay for 25 hours work a week at minimum wage level. We understand that taking people on is a risk, and that's why we think the government should step up and help employers do that.
And will young people lose their benefits if they say no to opportunities that are offered to them like this?
Without a good reason, yes. Sanction is part of the system. This is an offer on one hand, but it's an expectation on the other, because the future we don't want for young people is to be sitting at home on benefits when there are other options out there, be that training, work experience, or the subsidised job in the youth
And what's
guarantee.
a good reason to say no?
Well, look, I understand someone can have a family emergency where they can't make an appointment and so on, but if someone simply refuses to engage in it, then the conditionality, which is part of the benefit system, will apply.
The offer, though, only kicks in after somebody's been on benefit for 18 months. So given what you've said, that this is a moral mission, that any day somebody sitting at home doing nothing can have a sort of scarring effect, why on earth wait 18 months?
Well, that's the backstop of the subsidised job, but people will be offered the training and other parts of the offer long before they've been out of work for 18 months.
The minimum wage for 16 to 17-year-olds is £7.55, rises to £8 per hour in April 2026. There was a big article in the FT this weekend saying a lot of people under 25 feel that they're never going to have a stake, they're never going to have a house, they're never going to... Working hard will not give them a deposit to buy a house in the United Kingdom. So there's also a real feeling that they're excluded, that the older people have eaten all the pies, and that there's this sort of cultural thing which is being tapped into, I think, by some of the parties of the left.
Yeah.
That one of the problems is not that I'm out of work, the problem is all of you have nabbed everything.
You've eaten all the pies.
Yeah.
Not just me and you. I mean, I think that is, from a political point of view, one of the really interesting things here. And I just wonder if this, as a political narrative, to sound pompous, is something that's really going to become a big deal in the next 6, 12, 18 months. If you look at polling of the under 40s, under 30s, and I'm going to make a generalisation so we can talk about it, the mainstream parties are not doing it for them. And the Greens have been surging in certain groups. The Greens often lead among young women. Reform are also doing very well with some groups, particularly young men without degrees. And I think we're seeing now in the polling the generation gap playing out. And talking to Labour MPs about it in the last few days, there are definitely some Labour MPs who feel that the top brass in the party has not seen this coming towards them in the way that it might.
And who gets the vote at the next general election in the UK?
Oh, well, yeah, I mean, 16-year-olds, theoretically.
Obviously, we say hello to Scottish voters who have voted at 16, but that was just in Scottish elections.
We do. And that would be a very big change. But I think it's not just voters who are teenagers who are going to be voting for the first time. This is about people in their 20s, 30s, 40s. Even a government minister said something very rude about life in the UK. Am I allowed to say it? We'll get the bleep machine out again. Life in the UK being shit if you were under 50. So I think from a political point of view, this is a big opportunity for politicians who can go, yes, there's more than one generation here who doesn't feel that they're being spoken for, but a big political danger for political parties who are not paying attention to the way that different generations feel they're getting anything or nothing or something out of the system.
Joe, does this mean that also Labour's got its eye on voters who think they can't attack the welfare bill? When Pat McFadden tells Laura,
Absolutely,
we will have a sanction, are they talking to voters who think welfare checks getting bigger because of the budget?
Absolutely. And I think one thing the Conservatives managed to land quite well around the budget was this narrative, which of course Number 10 would deny, that people are being taxed more to increase the benefits bill. Pat McFadden saying today, do I believe there are a million young people who really can't work? No. I think trying to make the point that we do need to reform this system, that the graphs going up is not right. He did say to Laura that he wasn't ruling out the possibility of further reform, even after that botched reform to disability benefits in July. And there have been Conservatives who've tried to paint in recent weeks the Labour Party as the welfare party, being on the side of people who are not in work. So I suppose this intervention today is partly, yes, about trying to say to younger people, younger voters, we are doing stuff for you, and what the government are trying to do on house building, I suppose, is part of that as well. But also it's maybe a riposte to the Conservatives' attack that you're just letting people live on benefits.
And it's worth saying when we talk about this issue always that 60% of people who claim benefits are in work, and they get benefits because they don't earn enough to have a decent standard of living, as the system from the DWP would determine. What was interesting though to me is Pat McFadden also talked about was the fact that right now it is the case that if you have a health condition or you report having a health condition, you get more out of the benefit system than if you're someone who's on what we would traditionally have said on the dole and looking for work, but you don't have any health issues. Now, Pat McFadden explained, which is true, that is what was the way the system was designed under the Conservative administration. One of the things that they tried to do is the Labour government, when they ditched some of their reforms, but they did try and close that gap. But there is when you look at the welfare system, there is an incentive to raise your income according to the government if you say that you have a health problem rather than you're someone who's looking for work. That is, and I know some people will feel incredibly strongly about that. I don't say it for any reason to be provocative or to try and stir this up, but that's the facts of the way that the system is designed at the moment. And I thought that Pat McFadden was hinting at trying to close that gap still further in the coming months or years, which of course would go down like a cup of cold sick with some of his own backbenchers.
And he seems to be saying he's already halved the gap, but he wants to continue that work. And also, I thought it was interesting that he was trying to argue that this is an international problem in terms of young people not in education, not in employment, not in training, that there have clearly been some post-COVID challenges.
For sure.
There's also been technology, AI, the job market changing, especially some entry-level jobs disappearing. And he said, talking to employment ministers internationally, lots of other countries are facing similar problems. That doesn't necessarily mean that he's not got a lot of work to do, and the sort of mental health and neurodivergent health problems sort of challenge is part of that.
It's being politicised along the following lines, really. Alarm Clock Britain and Benefit Britain. And it's interesting because I went to a 60th birthday party last night, and my friend's daughter, who's 21, has a boyfriend who I'd met who's 21. He's a student at Manchester Uni, but he's also working on a building site. And he's one of those people you meet who's 21 who couldn't really be working any harder. Hello, I'm working on a building site. I'm trying to study for a degree at Manchester Uni, which I love, by the way. Manchester Uni is a great university, he says, loves it. So you've got people who can be poster child for this story in politics. And I predict that we will see case studies. And you're saying about people who can stoke a benefits bill. We have seen that in the papers. You share advice on social media how to raise your benefits. Is that good? We used to do a TV programme telling people how to get benefits to which they were entitled. And so many people in work get benefits because the state realises the cost of living is too high. So you could see sort of different case studies coming out in all the papers to be provocative.
And there are so many different aspects to all this and so many different sentiments, because it's also the case, and we know it from listeners and viewers, don't we, that there are lots of people who are incredibly frustrated that they're having to pay more and more tax, and they see the benefit bill going up and up and up. And there are a lot of people who are really cross about that. There are lots of people who find it really frustrating that their taxes are going up and they see that the benefit bill is going up. And that is a challenge. But there are challenges on all sides of this, because no politician would want to argue that someone who is genuinely in need should be in penury. Like, that's not what any politician would want to put out there. But it's very, very difficult to have this debate. And I would just observe that it's already changed a lot in the last 6 to 12 months. So I think a year ago, I don't think you'd have had an elected Labour politician in a senior position saying in terms, I don't think that million people who aren't working or in education have all got a good reason to be doing that. And I don't think that you'd have an elected politician saying so overtly from the Labour Party, I don't think it's right that all of those people get sickness benefits that do. And I think that debate has moved a lot, even in the last year.
Also, I mean, one key constituency in trying to solve this problem is business, right? You do need businesses to want to employ young people. And there are people, including your programme, Laura, who point out that the increase in employers' national insurance at the budget before last has not exactly encouraged, in particular, small businesses to employ young people. So it is sort of a web of different decisions and issues that impacts on the pretty stark stat that you had on the screen today.
Because the bill is going up. It's not just going up because it's going up by inflation. The numbers of people claiming key benefits are going up. And that's when the Labour MPs rebelled over the PIP payments last year. And was it last year? Was it 12 months?
July.
It was in the summer. Yeah, it was
in the summer.
Earlier this year.
It was 6
earlier
months.
this year.
My goodness. June, so, I mean, really, it's Labour MPs that are a large part of the constituency, the message that you're getting. Pat McFadden's really telling some of his MPs off by being on the TV today.
And saying, don't you think that just because you went in a strop the last time, that means that I'm not maybe coming back for more?
He had some language in terms of inequality, geographical inequality, which I'm sure is intended specifically for those ears in in Parliament, the benches behind him, to try and make that argument.
And I think for most people in the Labour Party, that is a genuinely held belief. I mean, one of my contacts was saying to me the other day, there's no Labour MP who wants to have 5,000 young people in their constituency who are not doing anything. That's not good for them. It's not good for the community. It's not good for anyone. So if the government can step in convincingly into this territory and actually make a difference, they were hoping that would be something that Labour backbenchers would actually welcome. However, the tone in which they do it, the punishment or the sanctions if people aren't up for it, and whether or not they're going to try and come back for more in terms of limiting the financial amounts that people are entitled to, those are all quite tricky areas. But it's interesting. You can see Pat McFadden, who once upon a time was a playwright, trying to steer this course through the middle of a very, very difficult political terrain. And a government source said to me, look, the right and the left almost sometimes meet on this, because you've got the left saying, oh, these people can't do anything for themselves. Then the right saying, oh, these people can never make anything of themselves. We have to reject both arguments, is what they said, and try and work out something in the middle. It's quite similar to the language of the New Deal, which was the New Labour model in the late 90s and early 2000s, where you have rights and responsibilities. Remember that, Paddy?
I do.
It's that kind of political argument where you can't get something for nothing, but if you need help, we will give you it. But if you can't be bothered to do anything about it, you will lose out.
There were also some Labour MPs, and I remember one I spoke to at the time of that welfare rebellion, who made the point, and I'm sure they wouldn't say this publicly, that actually the benefits that people in my constituency are getting, if they are cut, the impact on the local economy is really serious. So you effectively had a Labour MP privately arguing for maintaining benefits as they are, these disability benefits, partly because it brings money into their local area. They're worried about, which is an argument, but it seems to be, I think that'd be quite a controversial, provocative argument if you were making it public, because taxpayers' money should not be necessarily going into benefits purely to keep local high streets in place. And also there are Labour MPs I've spoken to who are, even though the party seems generally very pro getting rid of the 2-child cap, there are others, especially in constituencies where reform is a threat. One in particular said to me, I think this is a bad idea. My constituents back the cap. And certainly if you look at the polling on that, for all the mainstream parties, a majority of people backed the cap. So Rachel Reeves ultimately decided to do something that was popular with the backbenchers, kept them on side, gave her a lot of sort of plaudits, but isn't necessarily popular with voters.
Because I spoke to UK Hospitality in my budget coverage, they reckon that Rachel Reeves has come for jobs in the hospitality business in several ways, including rises in national insurance contributions for employers, and also in the aspects of the budget which are to do with hospitality. Now, that's contested by the Treasury. They say they're trying to help pubs and hotels, but that's not what they see it. The man I spoke to from UK Hospitality said.
And the pub tax, which we talked about last week, I still think that in the weeks and months to come, that might become quite a big deal, because there's been a big stooshy about how much the rates are going up, and with the government's support being phased out at the same time, as you were saying, it's a bit complicated, but there's an awful lot of publicans around the country who are convinced that they're going to lose out, maybe quite significantly.
I think that Joe's point about this, how this is playing politically, is if you are a Labour Chancellor who makes it more expensive to employ people, that is a political fault line between you and the parties of the right. And it's particularly something that is coming from the mouth of the Conservative Party, whose leader in Parliament, we have discussed here before, has got a bit of pep in her pencil.
And it's also what comes from the mouth of businesses like James Reed, who runs one of the country's biggest recruiters, was absolutely crystal clear this morning that the NI rise last year has meant that jobs have gone.
We've got to get the economy going, because it's small and medium-sized companies that create jobs and give opportunities to people. And that is vitally important, because if that doesn't happen, we're going to have a larger and larger group. Because unemployment is rising. It's 5% now nationally, but it's 15% for young people.
And I remember roughly this time last year, I think you came on and you said what we're seeing in the labour market looks kind of worrying, and I predict that things are going to take a turn for the worse. Now, sadly, you were proven right about that.
I wish I'd been wrong, but that was correct. Yes.
What are you seeing now?
Well, we're seeing a continuing job drought. There's a scarcity of jobs.
A job drought?
Yeah, I'd call it a jobs drought. I mean, it's been going on for 39 months in a row. Last period, 40th, I think it flattened out. So we might have hit the bottom, I don't know. But our data is showing a continuing decline in vacancies, 16% down in November year on year. So this is a continuing problem. It's a big issue.
So, given all the complexities of this welfare debate, given how it is part of this idea of generational tensions or generational inequalities, maybe it's not surprising that people, particularly young people, are quite interested in new political outfits. And one of those new political outfits is your party.
Mine?
Your party.
Oh, I haven't started a party.
Paddy's
Give it
party.
time, Paddy.
Oh,
You
yeah.
can have a party, a
So-
different kind of party.
Now, your party, you've done a lot of work on this. Did it have a name, then it didn't have a name, it had a launch, then it didn't have a launch, then it had a conference, then they didn't like playing Imagine? What's happening with your party?
In just 6 months, it has been a roller coaster ride, Paddy, hasn't it? Really. And when Zara Sultana and co. Mentioned that your party was an interim name, they said, "Oh, that's not actually going to be the final name. Don't worry, we'll have a vote." And yet, in the conference last weekend, they actually did decide on your party. So it's been a strange 6 months. The start of it, the launch of it, was controversial because Zara Sultana seemed to come out of the blocks ahead of Jeremy Corbyn. You've got this party with these two big figures of the left who clearly have big groups of people behind them. Jeremy Corbyn, when he was Labour leader, energised hundreds of thousands of people, got a big share of the vote in general elections. Zara Sultana, a sort of new, young left voice. And yet the basic 6 months in seems to be that there's a lot of mistrust and distrust internally, a lot of internal wars and factions. They launched it in a strange way. Then in September, there was this membership portal, which was quite controversial, a legal battle over membership subs from people who'd joined. And you now have a situation where there is a collective leadership model that's been agreed to. And there was news on your programme, Laura, about who might be leading the party in Parliament.
Yeah, so after a slightly chaotic conference last week where they even tried to chuck out some members before it all got going, it was all very confusing. The decision last week was that they would have a committee of members being the leader of the party, as it were. So not having a traditional sort of top-down model. Although Zara Sultana this morning said that they would have a parliamentary spokesperson, which to all intents and purposes sounds to me like a leader in Parliament, and there would be an election for that in due course. Now, that was not some other people's understanding of what they'd actually agreed, but that's what she said this morning. And she said she intended probably to run for that job. And if Jeremy Corbyn also wanted to run for it, then they'd end up having a straight fight between the two of them, which almost takes you right back to the beginning of 6 months ago. Who's going to be in charge of this thing, Jeremy Corbyn or Zara Sultana? And the appetite for new political outfits is definitively there. They say they've got 50,000 members signed up. And I think actually what I would reflect is this might be incredibly disappointing for people who looked at this and thought, this is what I want. This might be great. But then the early days of the organisation have been something that's been pretty shambolic. And in fact, so one of our viewers got in touch this morning. Hi, Laura, I went to the conference. It was awful.
Ooh.
There was no real discussion, just half a dozen people shouting on a stage. So many people were disappointed like me. So we're not sneering at all. We're saying it's been chaotic and people really want it to work.
And there's so much opportunity
doesn't look like
in
it's
terms of the
credible.
polling.
Exactly, because the Greens are going, thanks very much, we'll have them.
They are gobbling up all of those former Labour voters on the left. Zach Polansky, a clear leader, seems to be really in charge of his party. Like, you know, some clear messages. He's always the guy on the stage. There's no debate over who's in charge, always on social media. Now, Zara Sultana and Jeremy Corbyn are very skilled communicators as well. But we don't, I mean, we saw Zara Sultana on your programme today, Laura. We don't see them as often clearly setting out their policies. And they are policies, some of which I'm sure are very popular in terms of nationalisation, in terms of collective ownership, partly because all the headlines again and again and again seems to be about internal battles in this strange conference that they had in Liverpool.
And she said actually this morning, we don't have policies yet because we haven't sort of discussed them and then voted on them yet. So I think it's difficult as that one, and unscientifically,
Yes.
but as that one viewer got in touch to say who wanted to look and see that's a great offer and I was excited about it, it's hard for them to look at what they've seen so far and think, hooray.
Yeah. Okay. So look,
Pre-Polansky, Actually, would the Green Party have gobbled them all?
Well, it's interesting because what did the Green Party have before Polanski? They had
twofer.
two leaders, exactly.
Yeah, but pre-Polanski, this is a new phrase on me, Joe's coined. He's always coining new phrases. The pre-Polanski Greens. And out there now are students of politics going, yes, the pre-Polanski Greens. And it's a reminder to me of this giant kaleidoscope changing in our politics. And I think we can very usefully say there's been a realignment on the right post the Conservative ditching by the public at the 2024 general election.
For sure. And Reform has prospered at the Conservatives' expense, also at Labour's expense. Okay, Reform are not just taking votes from the right anymore.
And one difference maybe on the left is that actually the Greens and your party, however, by the time of the next general election they are formed and who's in charge of them, have intimated pretty clearly that they will try and work together and maybe not stand against each other in key constituencies.
And she said that this morning on the TV. She said, yeah, we'll probably find a way of working together. So
but that's what Nigel Farage said about the Conservatives.
It is, and that's what lent Boris Johnson his enormous parliamentary majority in the days when having a majority of 80 was a big deal before Keir Starmer came along and blew that out the water. So yeah, Nigel Farage's decision to make way in most places for Boris Johnson's Conservatives was an absolutely definitive moment for the Tories having that size of election victory in 2019.
So let's talk about Nigel Farage because he went to Scotland and he found a peer to defect.
Yes.
Apparently the defections are being vetted to make sure they get the right people in the public eye, in the eyes of Reform. So who is he who has defected?
So Malcolm Offord. Oh, sorry.
Sorry, no.
Oh, no, go ahead.
Stereo.
Malcolm Offord, Lord Offord, a Scottish financier, banker, who's probably a bit of a peripheral figure in Scottish Conservative politics, but was a Conservative donor, got a peerage, got put in the Scotland office.
He was a minister.
As a minister, and is quitting the House of Lords to run for Holyrood. You can't now, under the law, be in the House of Lords and be in the Scottish Parliament. So he has quit the Lords, a pretty well-paid gig, to run for Holyrood, and the expectation seemingly is that the Scottish Party, Scottish Reform UK, that didn't necessarily have a leader, will now have him as a leader. That has already put some noses out of joint with other people who defected earlier at a local government or a Scottish Parliament.
That's right, because
level.
they've had council representatives speaking for Reform in Scotland thus far. Now somebody who's been in the House of Lords. But it is, I think this is a big deal. He might not be a huge household name beyond his own household, but he's somebody who was a government minister and was one of Kemi Badenoch's front benchers. So he's not a person who turns up in the House of Lords occasionally to have lunch and then go away. He's an active part of Kemi Badenoch's front bench team. It's very interesting to see what will happen next, because the assumption of the other Scottish branches of the UK-wide parties have been, well, Reform's not going to do us as much damage here as they might do in the rest of the UK. Scotland is instinctively more sort of standoffish towards Nigel Farage. That's been the assumption. It's very clear now that Reform are a significant electoral threat to the SNP and the Labour Party in Scotland too.
Partly because of the proportional system, whereby on current polling, they could have a sort of 12, 13, 14, 15, sort of low mid-teens in terms of representation. And because of the list system, you have the constituencies where you have one person who gets a seat and then a proportional top-up with a regional list. It's very easy for Nigel Farage to say, OK, Malcolm Offord, yeah, you can be our sort of leader. It's not confirmed, but that seems to be what's happening. And I'll put you in the number one slot in, let's say, central Scotland. And therefore, you've got basically a guaranteed seat in Holyrood.
You see, it's another thing that I learned from you. You're very, very good on the Scottish voting system. It's important because it's very easy to do a read across just by home nation and say, it's Scotland. But actually, the voting system itself is so important in Scotland to understand. And I know if it had been left to me to summarise, I would have left that out, because we know it benefited the SNP in various stages of their amazing European-wide victory lap. They were seen as one of the most successful parties in Europe.
Yeah, and it's funny because voting systems can both hurt and help in all sorts of really interesting ways. But once upon a time, there was a young reporter working in Scotland who wrote a very excellent book about the referendum.
What was his name?
Stop.
Scotland.
Oh, stop. Project Fear still available at all good bad bookshops.
See, that modesty lasted about not even a whole second.
So 3 seconds.
Not even it wasn't even a whole second, Pike.
I'd say one real challenge for Malcolm Offord is, if he is going to be Reform's leader, he very quickly is going to be in the public eye, doing TV interviews. He's actually been quite a low-key figure so far. There are going to be TV debates for the Scottish elections ahead of May. He's going to be doing lots of clips for TV packages. He's going to be on Radio Scotland many mornings. And that training that other people in other parties have had, he just will not have had to that extent. He's not like John Swinney, who's been doing it for 25 years, or Anas Sarwar, who's done it for 15 or something. And that could be a quick challenge.
And we are seeing, though, as reform sort of comes of age, if you like, that increased scrutiny is from sort of top to bottom of the party, not least Nigel Farage, who in the last few weeks, as often happens with prominent politicians, have to deal with allegations that are uncomfortable for them, not just on one occasion, but on repeated occasions. And the allegations that have been made about Nigel Farage's behaviour as a schoolboy in London have come not once, not twice, not 3 times, not 4 times. There have been many of his former classmates who've now gone public, some of them in interviews with you, Joe. And I think you've seen, interestingly, Nigel Farage, rather than trying to sort of just close it down and say it was a long time ago and I'm sorry if I offended anybody, actually become more and more bullish and trying to defend himself by attack. And he had quite a prickly press conference on Thursday, Joe.
He did, and he was attacking the BBC among other organisations and comparing BBC comedy shows in the late 70s and early 80s where these are alleged bits of bullying happened, comparing what was on BBC TV with what he's alleged to have said to people. I suppose what is interesting about this is some of these allegations have been around for 12 years, first reported by Michael Crick on Channel 4 News in 2013. But they have been built on by both Mr. Crick's biography of Nigel Farage and The Guardian's reporting and some BBC reporting as well. And a key challenge and a key dynamic here for Nigel Farage is that if you talk to some of the people who went to school with Nigel Farage who say that they were bullied in a racist or anti-Semitic way, it was his response to those allegations which seems to have encouraged them to speak out or speak out more openly. Because there's a step between speaking off the record without your name in text form and then going on the record and then going on broadcast or then having a photo. And he has almost unwittingly, seemingly encouraged people to take those steps because certainly some of those I've spoken to seem very angry at his denials. Now, the arguments he makes about the passage of time, about that others have made about our memories correct, I think are true. In terms of political motivation, that is also arguably part of it. But there are people who have come forward with these allegations, either people who you might class as sort of alleged victims or witnesses. Witnesses are probably the larger group who say, I suppose it is sort of a political motivation, because if this is somebody who I remember as a schoolboy and he was like this, the fact that he could become our Prime Minister means I want to speak out. Even though we should say the schoolboys who've spoken out seem to be from a vast number of different sort of political backgrounds.
But they've been angered because Richard Tice has called it twaddle. But it's very bad-tempered, this argument now, because it hasn't been shut down. Nigel Farage is actively going for the BBC.
But he also produced a letter from somebody else who was at school with him who said, I don't recognise any of this.
And there are 100% of people we've spoken to who do not remember this. Yeah. And some of them who don't remember Nigel Farage. But there are people who do remember Nigel Farage and don't remember these particular experiences. So he should completely set out the sort of breadth of recollections at Dulwich School in that time period. But also it's worth pointing out one of the most prominent people who's spoken out, a guy called Peter Ittedji, who is a film director now, but at the time was a 13-year-old Jewish pupil who says that Nigel Farage said Hitler was right and gassed them in reference to the Holocaust. Nigel Farage has explicitly said that is not true. Those allegations are untrue. So he has explicitly contested and denied those particular allegations.
I suppose, though, for me, the really interesting thing here is whatever the content of allegations that are being made about him, Nigel Farage contends that he is on his way to Downing Street. as he makes his way to Downing Street, as he hopes, with that, every single day, every single week, every single month, the level of scrutiny on reform will increase. And so the handling of how you respond to challenging stories becomes so vital and so crucial. And as you said, Paddy, this has all become quite bad-tempered. And you have to wonder how people watching that will respond to it. Now, we don't know. We can't speculate about that with any kind of certainty. But it becoming bad-tempered when there's been something awkward is definitely the pattern that we've seen. And
it's not how media training works. If you set yourself up in as media training, you say to your principal, could be a business person, could be a politician, when faced with a series of nasty allegations, you don't reach for the bad-tempered button. So that's an interesting misstep in the eyes of how these things are handled, because Nigel Farage has been very well-stepped in getting to grips with a plain-speaking approach to the British public.
Absolutely.
He's a man you can have a pint with.
One of the reasons Nigel Farage has been politically so successful is because he talks in a way that people can understand. He doesn't use words like stakeholders and delivery and other kind of talk about white papers or select committees. He talks in ways where he sounds like a normal person and somebody who might understand things that you're going through. And losing your temper is, for some people, probably a less appealing way of coming across. On the other hand, I'm sure as well there are lots of people who thought, hang on a minute, give the guy a break. You can't give him a hard time over what he said at school many, many decades ago.
Well, I'll tell you what it means is that what all our principal performers in politics said at school is now open game. And the younger ones, there'll be video of them. So the thing about Nigel Farage is he's just pre-digital age. He's sort of my age, and it was very unusual to find. You probably have a cine camera.
Have a box brownie.
Box brownie. Get the box brownie out. It's Nigel's going to speak. And actually, what's going to happen is younger people are going to be caught out in.
But it's like your tweets. What did your tweets
Yes.
say when
Get
you were a
ready.
teenager? I think the one difference though is that I'm not sure this is going to count for every single possible politician. I think the fact we're talking about a potential prime minister does change things.
And that's what's changed it, I think, without question. That is what's changed it. And that is what Reform is now having to deal with, is an increased level of scrutiny, because they're not characters on the fringes anymore. They've been ahead in the polls for many, many, many months. They are publicly saying their plan is to expand, professionalise and get to Downing Street.
And we remember what was happening with before David Cameron became Prime Minister, or ahead of Boris Johnson becoming Prime Minister, where the Bullingdon Club, this controversial dining club at Oxford University, and a picture of all these smartly dressed
Boris Johnson's school reports, the whole, this is not new to go back through history. What Keir Starmer said about the monarchy when he was a teenager, whatever the socialist pamphlet that he wrote for, I think that was in one of the papers this morning.
It is in one of the picture of a very young Keir Starmer. But I think the thing is, we are going to see more of it. Newscasters, I'd really like to know as well, to what extent is the 17-year-old Jew, the 59-year-old Jew, is a very interesting...
Such a good debate, isn't it?
Good debate.
Because arguably, we all want to forget ourselves as teenagers. What does it matter? But also,
I love being a teenager.
But also, are you not shaped? Are there not early signs of your personality and your belief system at that age? And couldn't you track yourself back, Laura and Paddy, to what you were like when you were 16?
Yes.
I was exactly the same.
Now, look, this podcast has been running for 60 minutes. I feel like I started it, I was 16.
I was going to say.
I began here as a teenager. I'm
Your
leaving as a
60th
man.
birthday will have...
Joe, you are a remarkable man. You tell us lots of things. You coin phrases. I'm glad Henry Zeffman's not here. No, it's not. He'll never have got to the end of this podcast. So we say thank you very much to you listening, joining us.
Thank you very much indeed, newscasters. And if you are a younger newscaster, please
Yes,
do tell us
tell
if
us.
you've been doing the awful thing of talking rubbish about a generation which we do not understand.
So it's goodbye.
Goodbye, everyone.
Goodbye.
Bye.